Okay, the master is sounding good, the audio's great, the client's happy, everyone's happy with the sound of the master, but there's still some really important things to do so that we get the master, the great sounding audio, out into the world in the correct way. So today I'm going to talk about exporting, downsampling, DDP files, PQ sheets, sequencing and file delivery. And that, I know, sounds incredibly exciting. But yeah, joking aside, it's not the fun bit of doing all the using compressors and EQs and manipulating the sound, but it is the super important bit of mastering that not many people really talk about as much, especially on social media and YouTube and stuff. Because let's face it, it's admin. And who wants to do the admin? We want to slam stuff into compressors. So today, as a follow-on from a previous video where I walked you through the whole mastering process, I'm going to show you the next step, which is all of those things I just talked about. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'll link it below in the description or put it somewhere so you can go and check that out. And this is kind of really what separates amateurs from professionals in a way, because people, you know, might get a great sounding master, but if it's delivered in the wrong way, or if your client uploads the wrong file type, it can ruin the release. So yeah, it's not the most exciting, but it is crazy important. So let's dive straight in and we'll start looking with the exporting the final master. So you've got the master in your DAW, it's finished, the audio's good, you've done your fade outs, you've done your fade in, so this is exactly how you want your audience to hear it. Now what I do is I export the master at the same sample rate and bit depth as my mastering session. Typically that's 4824 or 9624, sometimes higher, it depends on what the client has sent. I tend not to upsample stuff that clients have sent me. I usually work with what they send, and that's typically, like I say, 4824, 9624. I don't use my DAW for doing any downsampling or dithering. I export from Studio One, which is what I use, and then I open up those files in iZotope RX because it has a really clean downsampling and dithering. You might be thinking, well, aren't they all the same? And the answer is no. Every DAW actually downsamples and dithers stuff ever slightly different and has slightly different noise floors. Now these are all so low that they're barely perceivable, but I've got the software to make the cleanest downsamples and files available, so I'm going to use that instead. So export from Studio One at the native sample rate and bit depth. Don't do any changing at that point. Take it into iZotope RX, and then I do all my downsampling and dithering in there. So what I will do is bring up iZotope and then I'll just quickly show you what's going on. So let me swap my screen around. So there we go. So this is iZotope RX, and it has this awesome batch processor in it. So you can put a load of files in and it'll just batch process them all. And what I've done here is put in my module chain the resample tool. So I'm resampling. I've already done this, so it's not showing anything on here, but these are 4824 files. I've chosen to resample to 44.1. So we're downsampling, and then that is getting sent to its own folder, and it's also getting dithered down to 16-bit. And then I'm also, after it's hit the resample, it's also going out I'm being converted to an MP3 and being sent to a different folder. So this is really handy for batch processing, especially if you've got big albums and stuff to do. We can just do that all in one go, and it'll send my CD resolution files to one folder and my MP3 files to another. And that's it really for the downsampling and the exporting. That's my process. Now, if it's a single track, you might not want to bother. You might export at 4824 from your DAW and then just export a 4416 from your DAW and not bother taking it out and doing this in RX. It's up to you. Like I say, the sound difference is minimal, but there are differences. So like I say, this is the cleanest one available, so I'm going to use this every time. In fact, let me show you, I can actually show you a website that has all of these. I'm just pulling it up now. So yeah, so let me just switch my screen again. I'm still getting used to this OBS. So switch back, here's my screen. So this is src.infinitewave.co, and this will show you all the different downsampling of different DAWs. So let me just find, where will it be? Isotope RX to Isotope 8.1. Let's go for that. That's the latest it's got. And then let's find, let's go for Logic X. So hopefully you can see that there's a bit of difference here. Now in Logic there's this purple background as opposed to black background here is showing a higher noise floor. Now it's way down here in the like minus 130, 120 dB. So inaudible, but it is there. There's some noise there. And that's what I mean when I'm saying if you've got the tools to do it, you know, to do it properly, why not? Let's see what the 1K tone looks like. So there you can see as well, there's some upper harmonics that it's creating when it's downsampling. So there we go. That is just a little kind of explanation as to why I do that isotope thing. Like I say, you don't have to. The sound difference will be minimal, but if you've got the best tools, use the best tools. That's, you know, why not? So the next thing is, once we've got those out, there's maybe a couple of other jobs to do as well. Sometimes people will want the individual files, individual tracks as individual files, but also if people are making CDs or vinyl, they might actually want the whole thing sequenced as an album, especially for vinyl and also for CD as well. So if you have an album and you've put a load of thought and care into the running order, the gaps between songs, maybe even the songs run into each other, so there's sort of ambient noise, or as one song's fading out, the other's fading in, which is fairly common actually. I do quite a lot of projects like that. Then you want to make sure that your album is exported exactly how you want it. You don't want to send it off to a CD duplication plant or a vinyl pressing plant and then they put a 2-second gap in between every song and it ruins the whole flow and vibe of your song. So first of all, let's look at a DDP file for CDs. So I'm going to pull up a session here and to show you how we sequence a DDP file. So this is Studio One, and these are all the individual tracks, and we put them on an alternate track so we can listen to the gaps between songs. We can move the gaps to how we like them, And say that example of tracks running into each other, we might want to just overlap them. So as this one's fading out, this one kicks in, and so we're getting a bit of that crossfade in, something like that. Now, we definitely don't want to do that for this album. So I'm going to just undo that. But that's the capability of DDP files, and we can move the gaps to how we like them. Say we want a really big gap there. That's crazy long, but you know, these are all just examples. We can just move these to exactly how we like them. And then I'll just undo that. And then when we export this as a DDP file, which is super easy, we just click up here, DDP. It actually exports a folder, and then we send that folder to a duplication plant, and they will use that folder, and they will then create the CD from this file, and all the tracks will be in the exact order with the exact gaps, any overlaps, etc. And also we can put the metadata information in here as well. So we can put the track name, artist name, the ISRC codes, which are used for getting your royalties and all that kind of stuff as well. And the DDP file contains all that information so that when you get your CDs back, not only is the audio exactly how you want it, the track names are on there, the album name, the ISRC codes. So if your stuff is going out and getting played in places, you're getting your royalties through. So it's a really smart way, if you are getting CDs done, of making sure your CD comes back exactly the way you want it. If you were to send, say you've got a 10-track album and you just sent off your 10 individual tracks to a duplication plant, they might put just a standard 2-second gap in between each one. That might be fine for a lot of albums, but like I say, if you've really carefully thought about the flow and you've got other stuff happening like overlaps, or you just want the gaps to be bang on, then a DDP file is definitely the way to go. So what's next to talk about? Next is the kind of the same thing, but for vinyl. So instead of doing the DDP file where we have tracks on 2 tracks with the different tracks going up like that, we sequence each side of a record into one continuous WAV file. So we do the same thing, we line up the gaps exactly how we want them. Stuff might overlap, it might just be silence, but we get the gaps exactly how we like them, then we render that as a complete WAV file, and that's what we send to the pressing plant alongside with a PQ sheet. What's a PQ sheet, I hear you asking? Well, this is just an information sheet which tells the cutting engineer at the pressing plant a bit more information about the files that they've got. It's a chance to give some contact details. It's a chance to put any notes on there about the audio. You might want to put some notes about, say, the actual sound of the record. For instance, if there's a lot of low end, or there's a lot of high end, or there's any specific things that are uncommon. Maybe, say, let's use the same example, all your tracks run into each other, so there's no silence. You could put a little note on there so that when the cutting engineer gets this and he or she is looking at the file and there's just no silence, at least they know that that's an intentional move on your part as the artist. And I've got an example that I'll just pull up quickly for you to see. So let me get that up and go back to OBS, and here we go. So this is a PQ sheet, mastering engineer, here's my details, don't ring my phone, client, name, label, artist, any queries, who to contact. Sometimes that's me, sometimes that might be the head of the label or the actual artist themselves. And then we have a section for notes for the cutting engineer. No silence between tracks. This is intentional. Please use track end times for track spacing grooves. So you know when you look at a record and you have those thicker grooves which indicate the gaps between songs, we call those track spacers or spacing grooves. There's lots of different names for them. So because in this instance there's no silence, we're telling the cutting engineer use the track end times to make those spacers, and then people can still skip between songs even though there's no actual silence. And then there's just other information: band name, album name, catalogue number. This is more for labels if you're running a record label. Side A, track count, side length, speed, because we don't want the record being cut at the wrong speed. And then we just put our tracks and where they start, where they finish, and how long they are. And this helps the engineer set up some cues in their software so that they know where the tracks are, where to put the track spacers, and they can also calculate how loud they can cut the record by how long the side of the record is. So if the side is super long, we have to squeeze the grooves of the record closer together, so we have to reduce the loudness. But if there's plenty of room, we can space the grooves out further, and that means we can do a louder cut. And then there's the same for side B down there. And that's it. So it's fairly simple, a PQ sheet, but you do need to do some careful checking and make sure all that information is correct. Otherwise, the cutting engineer could easily get confused and not know what's going on. And you have to appreciate, at a pressing plant, a cutting engineer is just cutting projects all day long. They've never heard the album before. They don't know who it is. They don't know anything about it. They just get a file. They have to cut the lacquer and give that on to the galvanics department and then the pressing department. So a lot of the time they might be in a bit of a rush, or they just, they don't have any background on your project. So providing this information is really useful and really helpful for you, making sure you get the best sounding cut record. So that's some pretty big things. What else have we got? Sequencing, yeah, metadata, that's all done in the DDP stuff. And then what else is there to talk about? Oh yeah, the kind of final thing, you've done the audio sounds good, you've exported it, you've got the different sample rates, bit depths, you've got your DDP for CD duplication, you've got your complete sequence size for your vinyl production. Then the only other thing really is giving the client some really clearly labeled folders and making sure they know exactly where everything is. So let me pull up quickly an example of that I've got somewhere for you here. And let me just switch from camera to screen. So here's my desktop. So here we go, complete masters folder. Then inside that we have a streaming and a CD, streaming and CD folder, and then a vinyl folder. So inside the streaming and CD, we have CD resolution 4416, high res 4824, and then MP3. So you've got the same masters, the same songs, but at those three different resolutions. And when it comes to uploading to your digital distribution, you have two options. If you know that the platform provides higher resolution streaming, like Bandcamp offers that, Tidal offers that, then you've got those high res 4824 masters to upload for that. If it's just your general digital distribution to go across all the different streaming sites and platforms, then I recommend using CD res 4416. Now, a lot of places will accept higher resolution, but then they still go on to do their own downsampling and dithering anyway. So they'll reduce it back down before they push it out to all the different sites. And we don't want them to do that because it's just an automated thing. No one is going to check that after it's done. And sometimes what can happen with when you're downsampling and reducing file quality is that it can actually change the peaks of your audio. So you might find when you downsample stuff, the peaks change, and you might actually, there might be some distortion there. So that's why at the mastering stage, we can check all of that and make sure none of that's happening. So that's why I would recommend still using 4416 if you're just pushing it out to just everything. It's safer. It means that the distributors aren't going to do their own downsampling and they're not going to mess with your files. So that's what I recommend. And what I tend to do is I've got all this information in a handy PDF here as well, a 2-page thing that I send to all my clients inside the master folder so that they've got all that really clearly laid out and they know where to send what kinds of files. So you've got your streaming CD files in this folder, then in your vinyl masters folder, we've got a few different things. So we've got individual files, just so the client has those for any future use. We have the complete sides. So this is a 2-disc album. So disc 1, side A, side B. So side A is a 15-minute WAV file. Side B, oh no, I was looking at the date then. Oh no, the time, that's the time when it was created. Oh, it was 15 minutes anyway. So yeah, duration 15 minutes, side B 12 minutes. And then same for, this is disc 2, side A and side B. Then for this specific project, this was an album and an EP at the same time. So we've got all the individual files and then the album, complete sides, EP, side A and side B. So you've got all those different files, 1, 2 in there, 4 in there, God, I can't even remember, 14 in there. And then in each of these folders, you've got all those as well. So it's a big old folder, about 2 gigs worth of files, I think, in this one, if I remember rightly. And so everything's labeled, everything's nice and clear. And like I say, there's the file delivery thing in there as well, just in case. So here's my desktop of our trip to Northumberland. Not that it has anything to do with mastering, but there you go. So that's it. That's just a bit of a quick rundown, or maybe it wasn't so quick, I don't know, of kind of, you know, not the most exciting part of mastering, but it's essential. And if, you know, a client gets just a load of messy files in folders that aren't labeled and they don't know what to do with them, if they end up sending an MP3 off to get cut at the vinyl pressing plant, you're gonna have some big problems, you know, you could easily ruin releases. It's happened so many times, not through me obviously, but I've seen it happen where people have sent wrong files, or they've sent the wrong resolution to somewhere, and you know, it's kind of messed up the whole release and everything. So I can't stress how important it is to really get all this stuff right, and have everything nice and clear. So as well as me as the mastering engineer knowing where all the files are, the client knows as well. And it's also really important that I've got it all really clearly labeled, because what might happen, and what sometimes does happen, is weeks or months down the line, a client might get, say, a placement on a film, or the tracks might take off, or the album release might not be for months yet. Then they'll come back to me and say, oh, I just need this file or this file. Have you got this file? I need it for this. Or we might need to redo something, or there might be different versions we need to do. And because I've got everything really clearly labeled and I know exactly where it is, it's super easy for me to pull those up, you know, months or hopefully not years down the line. But if we needed to, I could, you know, that's the point. So yeah, there you go. Hope that's helpful. Hope it's interesting. If you want to get into mastering, you better get used to it, because it's, like I say, it's a big part of it. It's not as exciting as using analog gear to manipulate the sound and all that stuff. But you know, it's part of the job. We've got to do it. So yeah, as I said at the beginning, if you've not seen the previous video, go check it out. And I'll be doing more of those mastering walkthroughs. It seemed to prove quite popular. So I've got a couple of other tracks lined up. I'm just checking with the artists to make sure I'm allowed to use the tracks. As always, just drop any questions in the comments. Like I've said before, I'm crazy busy with mastering and vinyl cutting work. So these videos are completely unedited, a bit off the cuff. So I might have missed some stuff out. I might have got some stuff wrong. I might have misremembered stuff or just left some really important bits out. Hopefully not. But you know, if you've got any questions or there's anything else I can help with, just leave me a comment. And yeah, as always, I hope you're all well. Get in touch with me anytime, and I'll see you next time.